Hi apes, welcome to Heart of Darkness lecture number 1. Hopefully you've read all of part 1 of Heart of Darkness. You should have, because you were supposed to take the reading check to be able to view this video. And today we're going to talk about a variety of different topics. I'm going to be going through part 1 of Heart of Darkness and calling your attention to certain passages. But like Joseph Conrad, I'm not going to tell you why these passages are significant. I'm just going to show them to you and call your attention to them, and then allow you to discuss them in the comments in your discussion thread down below. So the first thing I'd like to do is provide a little context to Marlowe's journey and where he went. So here's a map of Africa. We can see right here we have this area of unexplored territory. This is one of those blank spaces on the map that Marlowe comments on that he would like to go visit as a child. And that's the first passage that we're going to be looking at. So remember that. Marlowe would have taken his journey from Europe and followed the coast. And he starts talking about things in around this area, and things start to happen. And then he would have landed probably right around here and then followed the river inland, quite literally into an area of darkness, an intellectual hole, because we don't know what is going on in this unexplored territory. So it's kind of nice to see this older map of Africa so we can have context about where Marlowe was taking his journey. The first passage I'd like to call to your attention is on page 5 of the Dover Thrift Edition. I have it highlighted now. When I was a little chap, that's the start of the paragraph. This is Marlowe talking about his childhood and the maps, that blank spaces on the map. So let me read for a minute. Now, when I was a little chap, I had a passion for maps. I would look for hours at South America or Africa or Australia and lose myself in all the glories of exploration. At that time, there were many blank spaces on the earth, and when I saw one that looked particularly inviting on a map, but they all look that, I would put my finger on it and say, when I grow up, I will go there. This is the one passage that I'm going to actually explain. After we're done with Heart of Darkness, we're going to be writing a critical lens essay, and those of you who choose the biographical lens, which is particularly pertinent to Heart of Darkness, will be able to use this passage as a good example of drawing on Conrad's life, because it is said that it has been recorded that Conrad said the exact same thing when he was a boy. He would point at the blank spaces on maps and say, I want to go there. So Marlowe wants to go exploring, and he decides that he needs to get an appointment to a ship from a company that's doing work in the Congo. And it's significant to me that he is unable to get his job without the help of a woman, which is very contrary to the time period. And we're not going to actually look at a passage, but his aunt is the one that gets him an appointment. And those of you who choose to do a feminist viewing of Heart of Darkness can focus on the women in this novella and how they're all very significant to the story. The next section I'd like to focus on, though, is on page 6 of the Dover Thrift Edition. It's the story of Frensleven, because he's supposed to replace Frensleven, and that's how he gets his job. So let's talk about Frensleven for a minute. We'll start reading. Frensleven, that was the fellow's name, a Dane, thought himself wrong somehow in the bargain. So Frensleven was trading an African chief for 2 black hens. And he didn't like it, right? He thought himself wronged in the bargain. So he went ashore and started to hammer the chief of the village with a stick. Oh, it didn't surprise me in the least to hear this, and at the same time to be told that Frensleven was the gentlest creature that had ever walked on 2 legs. No doubt he was, but he had been a couple years already out there engaged in the noble cause, you know, and he probably felt the need, at last, of asserting the self-respect in some way. So this Frensleven fellow goes and starts beating on this African chief, and they come back and they kill the guy. And they said, I think it's significant to say that Frensleven was a gentle creature, and then he'd been in the heart of Africa for a while, and it had changed him. So the last thing I'd like to call to your attention is when he gets there, he sees Frensleven's body, and the grass is growing up through Frensleven's ribs, and it says it's tall enough to hide his bones. I think that that image of the plants growing around this dead body is significant. Marlowe has to go to have a physical from the company. He goes to Brussels, which he calls the sepulcher city, and in your discussion you can talk about the word sepulcher and what that means and why he calls this a sepulcher city. He does it when he comes back to it too. He gets to the building where the doctor is, and this image when he walks in the door is very significant. He says, "There were two women, one fat and the other slim, sat on straw-bottomed chairs knitting black wool." That image of two women knitting black wool I think is very symbolic, and I'll allow you to discuss the symbolism in the discussion. I do feel that Marlowe's discussion with the doctor is important, and you might talk about that in your discussion where the doctor measures his head and asks about ever had any madness in your family. But let's move on to the next passage. It's on page 11 of the Dover Thrift Edition. Marlowe grabs a French steamer and travels along the coast of Africa. And as he's traveling, he sees two very important images that are contrasting images, and I think that we should talk about them in the comments. So it starts on page 11, about a fourth of the way down. It starts and says, "Now and then a boat from the shore gave one a momentary contact with reality. It was paddled by black fellows. You could see from afar the white of their eyeballs glistening. They shouted, sang, their bodies streamed with perspiration. They had faces like grotesque masks, these chaps, but they had bone, muscle, a wild vitality, and intense energy of movement that was as natural and true as the surf along their coast. They wanted no excuse for being there. They were a great comfort to look at." I think that that's important, where he says they were a great comfort to look at. So he sees these black people rowing the boat, and talks about, you know, they have this vitality, right? This intense energy, and I think that that's symbolic, and then that they're a great comfort to look at. Then we can compare that and contrast that to the French man-of-war. So he sees a French man-of-war. It's anchored, and it's firing its guns into the coastal forest of Africa. You can't see anything that it's firing at. It's just firing, like it says right here, into the continent. And I think that this is very interesting to contrast these two, and especially his statement when he sees this French man-of-war. He says, "There was a touch of insanity in the proceeding," and you can contrast to that where he says it was a great comfort to look at, to with this statement, "There was a touch of insanity in the proceeding." So we can talk about that as well in the discussion. I believe that Marlowe coming to the station and what he sees at the company station or the mouth of the river station is important. That's why we're going to do it in a close reading video. But the next part I'd like to call your attention to is on page, hold on, I lost it. Anyway, I don't know the page. So it's where it says, "I shook hands with this miracle." And this is where he meets the chief accountant, and the fact that he calls him a miracle, I think, is interesting. And the reason he calls him, oh, here it is. It's on page 15 of the Dover Thrift Edition. The reason he calls him a miracle is because this man is so beautiful to him. He is white, which I think is symbolic, and he wears really nice clothing, and they are all really well kept, and that's important as well. So we can talk about why he calls him a miracle. Marlowe's discussion with the company manager is very important, but once again, we're going to use that as a close reading passage for a different video. So the next passage is on page 20, and he's been there for quite a while waiting to get on the river and get moving, and a fire breaks out, and he has this man that comes by with a pail to fill it up. So let's read for a moment. "When the stout man with mustaches came tearing down to the river, a tin pail in his hand assured me that everybody was behaving splendidly, dipped about a quart of water and tore back again. I noticed there was a hole in the bottom of his pail." I think that that's significant. It talks about the inefficiency of Europeans in Africa, and very symbolic that we have this problem that we're trying to solve and we are not using the right tools to solve that problem. The last passage I'd like to call your attention to is on page 21 of the Dover Thrift Edition. It's the painting that he finds of Kurtz. And anything associated with Kurtz in this book is going to be important and symbolic, this one especially. It says, "Then I noticed a small sketch in oils on a panel representing a woman draped and blindfolded carrying a lighted torch. The background was somber, almost black. The movement of the woman was stately, and the effect of the torchlight on the face was sinister." This woman that he has painted is very symbolic, I believe. The fact that it's a woman is symbolic, that it's blindfolded, that it's carrying a torch, and that the background's black, I think, all symbolic parts of this painting. And we can talk about it further in the discussion. So these are all things that I'd like to call to your attention. We can talk about them more in detail in the discussion thread below, and I'll leave it to you to interpret their meanings. We'll see you in the next video. Bye.